Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox, and I would like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series sponsored by StoneTurn. A word about StoneTurn. Who do you turn to when you need assistance navigating the emerging risks around the pandemic, or help enhancing your compliance program? Who do you turn to for on-demand compliance resources and expertise? Turn to us, StoneTurn. Since 2004, council, corporations, and government agencies have turned to the global advisory firm StoneTurn when facing their greatest challenges. Make StoneTurn the place you turn for advice on regulatory, risk, and compliance issues, investigations, and business disputes. In this 5-part podcast series to celebrate Corporate Compliance and Ethics Week, we will consider each of the 6 elements required for an effective compliance program as laid out in StoneTurn's 6 elements of an effective compliance program. These 6 elements are risk assessment, governance and structure, policies, procedures and controls, training and education, oversight and reporting, and response and enhancement. Over this 5-part podcast series, I will be joined by Stephen Martin and Valerie Charles, partners at StoneTurn, and Toby Ralston and Jamin Tyler, managing directors at StoneTurn. In this episode, I visit with Jamin Tyler on training and education in a best practices compliance program. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and today I'm joined by Jamin Tyler. She is a managing director at StoneTurn, and we're going to take up the topic of training and communication. Jamin, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Jamin, if there has been one change in the workplace which has impacted compliance as much as any other change, it's been the work from home, starting in March or whenever most companies had to do so. And so I really wanted to start with that question. In the work from home era or coronavirus or COVID-19, how can you begin to think through a way to determine the effectiveness of your compliance training?
Yeah, so this is a really important question for people to consider. But at the end of the day, a lot of the methods that you use before work from home are still going to apply in the work from home situations. The difference is that you may not have FaceTime to be able to have the same sort of communications one-on-one with folks that you had previously. But that being said, communication is still really key here. It's really important to check in with employees as well as others who are involved with compliance activities. So people like HR are going to be really important to talk to and check in with to find out, what are issues that they're hearing about. When you do have trainings, how are people responding to them? Following up after you have trainings will be really important, and being really proactive about it, since you won't have those sort of incidental conversations, people stopping into your office. You can also, of course, leverage data that you receive from trainings. A lot of people, especially in work from home, are using virtual trainings, trainings that culminate with tests or certifications. Looking at places where you're seeing folks struggle with questions. Maybe there are certain questions that trip a lot of people up. If you're seeing folks that are or aren't actually taking trainings, obviously that's a pretty good indication of the success of trainings. Obviously, too, reviewing incident reports. If you have just done a training on a certain subject, but you're still seeing issues arising that should have been covered by that training, that's a good indication that maybe you need to rethink how you're explaining that. If you're using virtual trainings or trainings from a third party, maybe taking a look and seeing how well it applies to issues that you're seeing in your company, and maybe doing some supplementing of that either through in-person training or additional communication.
Jamin, in the 2020 update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs, we saw the Department of Justice for the first time talk about short training or maybe even short communications. I'm going to call that micro-learning, although I recognize others might call it something differently. How do you see that as fitting into an overall training regimen? Is communications sort of work hand in hand with training? And can a short sort of one message communication be a supplementary effectiveness for an overall training? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think microlearnings are a really great tool for compliance teams to use to supplement and make sure that you have these kind of ongoing communications to keep compliance issues top of mind. Microlearnings are great, especially now, given that employees are really busy. There's a lot of Zoom fatigue, and in an era where to actually do lengthy trainings, you really have to do them on Zoom. Being able to have these engaging short burst communications or trainings that can cover just one or two topics really quickly in a way that will keep employees and learners focused. It's a great way to just again keep those compliance topics at top of mind. They're also great, and they're a great way to respond when you are seeing issues arise because they can cover just one or two topics. If you're seeing a particular issue come up again and again, it's a great way to be able to quickly deploy a really targeted training to your employees so that they can get some really great training right away. That being said, of course, Tom, as you alluded to, these are great supplements to the kind of more deep dive trainings that we're used to, but they probably shouldn't replace those longer trainings that you have that can provide even more detail about expectations, and especially when your company has specific procedures or policies that you need people to learn about. But that being said, doing these sort of micro communications or micro learnings is just a really good way to keep compliance top of mind for your employees.
Jim, if I could maybe flip that a little bit, because the Department of Justice also said you need to risk-base your training. And for those gatekeepers in compliance, whether they be internal audit, whether they be finance, whether accounts payable, HR, legal, they may need a more detailed, more focused training. Would you find that to be a part of an overall training program as well?
Absolutely, and that's exactly where microlearnings are great supplements. But when you have individuals who are going to be providing guidance or overseeing compliance functions or have other compliance responsibilities, it's really important that they have a very in-depth understanding of those compliance topics. So, those microlearnings can supplement that once you've had those sort of in-depth periodic trainings. But having something that's a real deep dive where you can really get into the nitty gritty and be available to your employees or other gatekeepers or business units who are responsible for compliance functions, being able to be there in person and answer questions that may arise, go over more kind of detailed scenarios, that sort of thing. That's still absolutely critical to any effective compliance program.
Jim, let me move to a topic that might not appear on its face to really be communication, but I wanted to get your views on compliance ambassadors, and particularly in a multinational company with large numbers or some number outside the United States. Do you find compliance ambassadors to also be a communications tool and perhaps even more for the compliance function?
Absolutely. I mean, especially right now, with the remote workforces where you might not be able to get together in person. And when you're working with a global audience, having folks who are in these the global locations to be able to serve as, like you said, your ambassadors and kind of the arms and legs who can help provide day-to-day guidance and assistance to people on the ground. And especially with global operations, they can literally translate both linguistically and culturally some of the procedures and policies that you might have to be able to help folks on the ground wherever they are to really understand the compliance program, procedures, and expectations that you have for your employees. And again, this kind of goes back to that topic of communications and having these ongoing kind of line of communications with employees, again, wherever they are, to make sure that compliance is top of mind, and also allows people to answer questions that they may have. So being able to have identify ambassadors in your global offices who you can, again, provide that kind of detailed, in-depth training to, so they have a solid understanding of the compliance responsibilities at your company. That will just allow you to make sure that employees, whenever they may have an issue or a question or need to raise an issue, they have someone that they can go to, even if you're not necessarily available.
Jim, and unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I was wondering if any of our listeners wanted additional information on any of the topics you've raised in this podcast. Where could they go?
Absolutely. You can always find us at stoneturn.com. And if you're interested in connecting with me, I'm also available on LinkedIn.
Jamin, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
This is Tom Fox again. If you'd like more information on StoneTurn, check out their website, www.stoneturn.com. I've also linked to it in the show notes. I hope you will join us again for another episode in our 5-part series on the 6 elements of an effective compliance program. I know you will find it useful. This special podcast series, sponsored by StoneTurn, is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network.